Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's Lettermen Row. It's Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. It's Spencer Holbrook. If you haven't seen us for a while, you haven't, because I was out on a little bit of a mini vacation with some college friends, played a lot of mediocre golf. Now I'm back in the great state of Ohio after I was in that state up north. And I'm here to talk about all the Ohio State quarterback room. It's quarterbacks week at Lettermen Row. Again, it's Mick. It's Spencer. Mick, how are you? Did you miss me? And do you think that your life is better now that I am back in the fold at Lettermen Row this week?
Well, yes to both questions. I mean, I don't think people realize, obviously, you guys see Spencer and I talk on a podcast a couple times a week, but Spencer and I are probably, other than our wives, we probably text each other more than anybody else throughout the day, just figuring out story scheduling stuff, editorial things, different things that he's hearing, different things I'm hearing. Spencer and I talk like we are best friends, even though Spencer has some golf friends that he goes out with. I have my own friends. But Spencer and I, when it comes to work, we are work best friends for sure.
Absolutely. And that's the way it should be. We're going to talk about three best friends that anyone could have, plus one now, which is the Ohio State quarterback room. It's Tavian St. Clair, the true freshman. It's Lincoln Keenholz, the redshirt sophomore, and redshirt freshman Julian Sayin. I paused there because I had to catch my breath, not because I forgot his name. I promise I do not forget the name of the guy who's probably going to start at quarterback. That's where we start, Mick. Who's going to start at quarterback for this team? Everyone wants to know. I get asked every time I'm on a radio hit. I get asked all the time. I get texts. I got texts last week while I was on the golf course like, hey, can you tell me about these quarterbacks? I'm like, absolutely not, but Monday I will. And so this week I've been talking to people about quarterbacks. Everyone wants to know the big question in Columbus, Mick. Who is going to start at quarterback? You've watched the same amount of spring practice I have because we've only watched a little bit of it, and then we were booted out swiftly, and now they're in summer workouts. Who do you think is going to start at quarterback for this team?
I still believe it's going to be Julian Sayin. I think you still believe it's going to be Julian Sayin, but you'll get into your reasoning here in a minute. I think, obviously, like Ryan Day talks about, like the whole coaching staff talks about, each spring practice that we see is 1 of 15. Like it's a giant piece, every part is a giant puzzle. But then when you look at it, Ryan Day talked about, I believe, after the spring game, talking about how quarterbacks and even other positions, when you get into these moments in game, there's no such thing as like rising to the moment or being a gamer. It's just you fall back on what you're teaching and what you've been taught, whether it's at Ohio State or previously. And I have to think, even though it was just one practice, 1 of 15, that spring game where Julian Sayin fell back on his teachings to the point where he led a couple of touchdown drives, where he looked like he was in command of the offense, that has to stick with Ryan Day, Billy Fessler, and the rest of this offensive coaching staff a little more than just any other practice, because it shows you in the heat of the moment when there's actual fans in the stands, when there's actual stakes on the line because it's a game and your teammates, you're switching sides, you're playing with different lines, different wide receivers. Julian Sayin fell back on what his teachings and more than Lincoln Keenholz did, or at least when he did, it looked better from what we saw.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like you said, you fall back on your training. That's what Ryan Day talked about ad nauseum following the spring. He even admitted Lincoln Keenholz was ahead of Julian Sayin heading into the spring game. Then Julian has what I call a hell of a closing argument, and I think a closing argument is the right way to describe that. I thought it was really strong stuff from the young man from Carlsbad, California. It's worth noting that Ryan Day has in 2021 he went with the more experienced guy who had already been in the system for a year. Turned out to be an absolute no-brainer, the highest drafted quarterback in Ohio State history, and C.J. Stroud over the true freshman Kyle McCord. In 2023, he went with the more experienced player in Kyle McCord, who had a year on Devin Brown, and he kind of fell back on experience. Well, Lincoln Keenholz has a year on Julian Sayin. He's been in the system for about 6 months longer, because if you remember correctly, Lincoln did not enroll early. Julian did, which means Lincoln's really only been here for 6 more months. So the experience factor is not all that different. On top of that, Lincoln has played in 5 career games. Julian has played in 4. Julian has attempted 12 passing attempts. Lincoln has attempted 22. So when it comes to experience, it's not all that different. And Lincoln's biggest piece of experience was the abysmal, by no fault of his own, the abysmal Cotton Bowl against Missouri. Everybody remembers that. It kind of sticks with everybody as the Lincoln Keenholz game right now, which is not fair to Lincoln. In full transparency, I do not put that on Lincoln one bit. I put it on the coaching staff. I put it on the offensive line. I put it on the offensive line coaching staff. I put it on the quarterback's coaching at the moment. at that moment in time. I put it on the bowl preparation. I do not put it on the kid who had been at Ohio State for 6 months and gets thrown in against a pretty good Missouri defense that really wanted to be there in a 14-3 loss, which was just horrendous, awful, no good, terrible football. Stinky. You're right. But again, that is, I will say it a billion times as we talk about this quarterback room, that was not Lincoln's fault. So the experience is not all that different, and that's why I do think the younger guy is going to win this battle. If I look at the ceiling of these two quarterbacks, I think Lincoln's ceiling has shown to be much higher than maybe we anticipated heading into the spring. With that being said, I do think that the ceiling for this offense with Julian Sayin and 2 years of experience that he might have as a starting quarterback, I think it could be like sky high. And so I think the production in the spring game, the flashes elsewhere, and then the ceiling of the younger player in Sayin will end up winning out of this job. But man, like Mick, it's a good feeling right now that we're even sitting here talking about this, because there's an alternate universe where Julian looks really good in the spring. Lincoln looks like the Lincoln that we saw maybe a year or two ago, and Lincoln is on a different Big Ten roster or still in the transfer portal looking for a home, and then Ohio State is stuck with Julian Sayin and nobody to push him. So I like where this battle is right now. I ultimately think, like you, that Sayin is going to win the battle, but Lincoln Kienholz has made an incredible, impeccable push toward the starting quarterback job, and I think it is a massive credit to not only him, but to Chip Kelly, to Billy Fessler, to Ryan Day on developing him beyond just raw athlete from South Dakota into potential starting quarterback at Ohio State.
Yeah, totally. But again, it's like what we talked about, because we mentioned falling back on your teaching, and that's not just what Billy Fessler, Ryan Day, or even Chip Kelly did this past season with Julian Sayin and like Lincoln Kienholz. That's when Julian Sayin goes back home to California, he's working out with quarterback trainer Danny Hernandez, who now also works with Brady Edmonds, Ohio State's 2027 quarterback commit, and he's worked with countless other Power 4 quarterbacks. Like those two have been working together since before Julian Sayin was even starting high school football. So we can kind of talk down or maybe discuss the value of what quarterback trainers actually are, but they do bring some value. Ryan Day sends his son to a quarterback trainer, and he's a high school quarterback. Like getting those reps of different motions, different like drills, different things like that, all also contribute to the teaching. And I think while like Lincoln Kienholz has more game experience at Ohio State, he doesn't have that compared to Julian Sayin, because the fact is Julian Sayin can do that in Carlsbad, California, because he's just focusing on football. In Pierce, South Dakota, or however you say it, Lincoln Kienholz was going from the football field to the basketball court to the baseball diamond and then back to the football field, and there was no real time for let's spend an extensive amount of time throwing the football and just training these reps. So I think that's kind of what we saw in the spring game, and I think as time goes on, more comfortability in the system, more comfortability with Jeremiah Smith, even though it's easy to throw to him, or Carnell Tate or Brandon Ennis or some of these guys. Like as you get more of those reps for Julian Sayin, it's only going to look better throughout the fall. But again, credit to Lincoln Kienholz, credit to the coaching staff for putting him in a position as a guy that doesn't have all these quarterback training reps to be a potential starting quarterback at Ohio State.
I also think that didn't Lincoln run track? I think he was a 4-sport superstar out there. If he was a 4-sport athlete, then I mean, credit to Lincoln, because very few people on earth can be 4-sport athletes. I think me and Lincoln might be the only two that have ever done that in high school. So
that's why
me and Lincoln.
Yeah, you have such a great bond. I think Lincoln might have been the athletic director for all I know out there. He was a little bit of everything there in Pierce, South Dakota.
He's also got a hell of a golf swing. So maybe he's a 5-sport athlete. He's given up most of his other sports. What he hasn't given up is football and golf. So, he and I are alike in a lot of ways. Maybe we'll have to talk about that at some point. Where we're not alike, though, is that he can actually spin the pigskin at an Ohio State level. And I'm sitting here in a office talking about it. So there's a little bit of differences there. We don't know who's going to win the starting quarterback job. Ryan Day said it's really close, but he also said it's a 2-man battle, which eliminates true freshman Tavian St. Clair. Look, Mick, we don't have to do this. We don't have to consider him in the battle. We didn't consider C.J. Stroud in the battle against Justin Fields in 2020. We didn't consider Kyle McCord. Well, we did consider Kyle McCord a little bit, and he started a game as a freshman in 2021. In 22, Devin Brown was a true freshman. Didn't really talk about him a whole lot as far as like playing time, because Kyle was there and CJ was there. In 2023, we didn't really do a lot of talking about Lincoln. 2024, Will Howard was there. Devin Brown was there. Lincoln Kienholz was there. We didn't really have to think about Julian that much, except for when we saw those flashes in the preseason and last spring that showed us that maybe he could be something special eventually. You don't just come in and play quarterback as a true freshman at Ohio State. It's not going to happen. And I think for any program, if you're starting a true freshman at quarterback, you've got issues because there's going to be some growing pains along the way, as we saw at Nebraska last year, as we might see up north this year. No, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But what we're not going to do is pretend that Tavian is in this quarterback battle because Ryan Day told us that he's not. But with all of that to be said, there's a lot of development that Tavian St. Clair can do this fall. You've seen him a lot more than I have, but what we both saw of him in the spring, what were your first impressions of him as an Ohio State quarterback, not as a prospect who was going to sign with Ohio State? And what do you think he needs to do? You know him better than I do still at this point. What do you think he needs to do to get himself in position to eventually become the guy at Ohio State, pretty far down the road?
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about Tavian Spring because he's a guy as a third-team guy behind a young offensive line going against kind of a team that's full of third-team defenders and walk-ons. Like, he got to be much more of a football player than Julian Sayin or even Lincoln Kienholz did. When, plays broke down, he was full tackle, and he can kind of scramble around, dump things off to Des Jones or Phillip Bell or Bogdan Miller or Quincy Porter when he was on that third team with them. They can do some different things where it's he's outside the pocket and have some creativity. So there were some flashes there. And I think you even saw that in the spring game, but there was definitely not the consistency or just the understanding of defenses yet because, let's face it, a year ago he was preparing to play for a Division III high school football program in Ohio against a ton of teams that are actually in lower divisions. I've talked about this before. I don't know if it was on our recruiting podcast or here, but Tavian's center at Bell Fountain High School, and he's a great kid. I've talked to him before. Tavian's center was their center and then would flip over to the opposite side and play free safety on their defense. He played center solely because he was the only person they could have that could consistently snap the ball for Tavian. He's about 160, 170, maybe even 180 pounds. He's not a big dude, but that's just what you have to play with at Bell Fountain. And you don't have to have a great offense because when you have a guy with an arm that's outstanding, you have a couple talented wide receivers, you can make do with some certain things. They had a good offense, but also their offensive coordinator is now an assistant at Otterbein College here in Columbus. He's worked his way up. They had a good system against some struggling defenses. Now Tavian has to read a defense that has Caleb Downs in a secondary, Malik Hartford in a secondary. You got to beat corners like Devin Sanchez, Davis and Espinosa. He just hasn't had to do this before, especially when you have the scheme led by Matt Patricia. So there's a lot of things, whether it's just in practice, that he has to learn because he hasn't had to challenge himself to that extent yet.
So here's how I'll say it. And I have really treaded lightly on putting down or bashing, if you will, the competition that Tavian St. Clair played in high school. With that being said, I think it kind of needs to be said. So I played high school football for a school that graduated 46. My high school graduating class was 46. We had 17 to 25 members, depending on the year, on my 11-on-11 high school football team. We played against Indian Lake and Benjamin Logan, two West Central Ohio schools to Northwest Ohio schools, depending on where you cut the line off. Tony Girdman from Buckeye Huddle and I argue about what is Northwest Ohio all the time. I am a proud former resident of Northwest Ohio. I was born and bred there. Indian Lake and Benjamin Logan get a little dicey there. It might be West Central. Bell Fountain is a little West Central as well. That's beside the point. We played against Benjamin Logan and Indian Lake. Benjamin Logan and Indian Lake were also, they would play Division 7 schools and then they would play Division 3 schools. They were both on Tavian St. Clair's Bell Fountain schedule last year. So the school it's like 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon. The schools that Tavian was playing against also play against some of the smallest schools in the state. And so, yes, I'm not going to sit here and bash Urbana or Kenton Ridge or Bell Fountain especially, or Benjamin Logan or those schools because those are my people. But I know from experience that the competition level there, and Tavian knows as well, the competition level there did not prepare him well for Ohio State. And that's not to say he's unprepared to be at Ohio State because I thought he was better than maybe even I thought he would be his first year. But the development is going to have to happen to get to the speed of the game for Tavian is different than it was, for example, J.J. McCarthy going to Michigan from IMG Academy, or, Kyle McCord going from St. Joe's Prep to Ohio State. That is just not the same. And so 5-stars are not all created equal. They're not all born in the same place. They're not all playing the same high school football. Tavian's going to be a little while, and that's okay. So when you see him struggle in the spring game and throw a pick to Fahim Delane that was quite honestly not a great throw, like that's okay. He's going to learn from that. And in 2 years, he's probably going to laugh at that throw because he might be the starting quarterback in 2 years. That's all I'm saying here is like he's going to need time to develop. We don't have to put down Bellefonte High School football in order to say he needs a lot of time to develop. I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think he's got some Justin Fields traits to his game. And we don't have to talk about Justin in the NFL. At Ohio State, he was an absolute freaking superstar. So, and maybe that was too long of a tangent, but all that's to say is like Tavian's going to need some time to develop because the high school game did not prepare him as well as some other guys are prepared to come to a school like Ohio State. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, height, weight, speed, arm talent. Like Tavian's probably maybe the best quarterback in the room, just pure of all those attributes because he's legitimate at 6'3". He can throw the ball probably a good 60, 70. Like he can do whatever he wants with the football. And that's why when you got into a lot of these Elite 11 settings or these camp settings, when it's just shorts and shirts, one-on-one type of things, like accuracy challenge, like he can do all of that. But when you put a Caleb Downs or you put like some of these safeties Ohio State's going to have to face, even a Fahim Delane who had just gotten there and played good competition in the DMV area, like when you put those guys in a secondary and now you got to look them off to try and get your wide receiver open, and you even have somewhat of an inaccurate throw, like your mistakes get capitalized by X. Like that's just the process of playing at Ohio State. Like Tavian's not the only one that goes through that. Even like Quincy Porter was the number one wide receiver, like for according to some people, or just he was the top wide receiver in Ohio State's class this year, played in New Jersey and Bergen Catholic, the number one program in New Jersey. Like he had learning curves just because like that is playing at Ohio State. That's playing big time Power 4 college football. So no concerns about Tavian. It's just going to be a process for him. And this first year is going to be huge because, I mean, after that, the door is open for him, the succession plan for Tavian to be the guy whenever Julian Sand or Lincoln Keenholz or whoever wants a starting job this year are done at Ohio State. The door is very much wide open for Tavian St. Clair to be like, I'm the guy. We can have like a quarterback battle, but I'm going to be the guy, kind of how some people feel about Julian Sand this year.
Yeah, just think about it like Joe Burrow. Remember Joe Burrow? Maybe, we're kind of young there. I graduated the same high school class as Joe Burrow. He's right around my age. I remember watching him in high school thinking this guy's the greatest player ever. And he did turn out to be one of the greatest college football quarterbacks of all time because of the 2019 season. But that freshman year, everybody was like, hey, he's going to need time. Like, he's going to need time because he played bad competition. Like, he was playing against Meigs and some of the schools down there that I covered when I was doing prep stuff for the Post at Ohio University. Like, that's not the best competition in Southeast Ohio. Nobody's running from that. And that's not to put down the competition, just like it's not to put down the competition Tavian played. It took Joe Burrow a couple years, and then he battled Dwayne Haskins for the starting job in 2017/2018, and then the rest is history. Haskins and Burrow were both amazing. Tavian could be the same thing. 2 years to develop, and then you're off to the races, and we'll see how it goes. So, that is all. That's a good Tavian St. Clair conversation. We'll put a pin in that, and we'll get on, Nick, to the news of the week, I guess. It's a pretty slow time for Ohio State. The Buckeyes added a fourth quarterback to this roster. He will be on scholarship. His name automatically just absolutely skyrockets up all-time Ohio State names, and among the best names in college football this year. Ohio State's going to have a backup quarterback named Eli Brickhandler. No confirmation or ability to deny what his ancestors did. I would assume that they were handlers of bricks, and that last name has carried some weight for a long time. Fantastic name to start, and I think Eli probably knows that. He's the fourth scholarship quarterback by way of started his career at North Carolina A&T, then goes to Houston Christian. Had just a shade under 600 passing yards last year, 4 touchdown tosses, 2 picks. He comes here. He's going to be a backup quarterback for this team, probably the fourth quarterback break glass in case of emergency quarterback, and then he's probably going to be a glorified GA to kind of help some of these young quarterbacks along. But the Buckeyes have 4 quarterbacks in this room now, and they take a guy who is from Houston Christian who plays in an offense that a lot of people kind of study. And so it doesn't surprise me to see a program like Ohio State grab him from that offense and throw him into the Ohio State quarterback room to kind of bounce some ideas off of and be another voice in the room. I like this pickup, to be honest. We don't know a lot about him. And I don't think we will until we talk to Ryan Day and Billy Fessler and maybe Eli Brickhandler himself. But good pickup. I was kind of thrown for a loop by it just because I hadn't heard anything about this. But Eli Brickhandler is going to be a Buckeye.
Yeah, I think you and I both believe they could do something like this. There wasn't much buzz about it. Like there wasn't buzz about like, hey, somebody will visit, somebody like, I don't know, Billy Fester's been on the road, like you can do in-home visits. I don't know if you can do those with transfer prospects or anything like that. Like there just was not a lot of buzz or coverage about this. And admittedly, I don't know a ton about Eli Brickhandler, but obviously, like you said, great name, interesting prospect. If he's somebody that understands what he's coming into, like just to be in the room, to learn from these guys, help the guys, do whatever he can to kind of just become a player type coach, then it's a win for the Buckeyes to have another fourth quarterback like this.
Yeah. So, like I said, like we don't really know much about him, and that's okay. I'm going to try to get some more information on him at some point. But I wouldn't expect to see him, starting the Michigan game. But, he's going to be the fourth quarterback on this roster. Mick, we can get out of here on that. From Tavian St. Clair and Lincoln Keenholz and Julian Sand to Eli Brickhandler, Billy Fessler, Ryan Day, that whole quarterback coaching apparatus. It's a good year for Ohio State to be starting a new quarterback. There's a lot of weapons to choose from. There's a lot of offensive skill talent. There's a lot of offensive line reasons to be excited about the offensive line. So the quarterback will have a lot to work with. It's just a matter of putting it all together and who's going to be the starter. We really just don't know that at this point. What do you say we talk recruiting tomorrow, Mick? We'll talk some quarterback recruiting. Brady Edmonds. We'll talk 2028. We might even talk 2026. Steve Wiltfong has a report that the Buckeyes are in on a new prospect in 2026. Do you want to talk about that tomorrow, May 22nd?
I will be out tomorrow. We're figuring out some stuff.
Oh, that's right.
But at some point next week, we will get on a podcast and just talk a ton of recruiting because I don't know if you guys are paying attention on your calendars. The end of May is coming up next weekend. Next Friday will be May 30th, and that is when the first haul of official visitors will land in Columbus from John Glenn International Airport. They'll go to Ruth Chris or whatever, Prime Columbus. I don't even know the steakhouse or all these fancy places they'll get to eat, but they'll get put up in these nice hotels, the official visit pictures. Like the summer's here. June 5th, we got the first camp. Like we'll have all that covered here at Lettermen Row. We'll have a ton of stuff still coming here as we come up on like this busy recruiting camp season between myself, Alex Gleitman, Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons. I don't know about there's different people that contribute at different times. We don't know what the future necessarily is when it comes to just some of the news that is broken out about On3 and Rivals, but there will be different people bringing information to Lettermen Row throughout the next couple of weeks and months. And it's never been a better time to join. $1 for your first 7 days. Get you kind of ready for that recruiting season. And I think you'll want to stick around past that 7 days and get through this summer and into this football season where Spencer's going to take the ball and run with it from there.
Folks, he knows how to plug his own stuff. That's all we're saying. He knows how to plug the website, lettermenrow.com, $1 for your first week. I don't really have to say much more. Official visit weekend next week. It's officially here. Official visits are officially here. And then we'll get into camp season. Might take a couple of vacations along the way, just a little. And then before you know it, we'll be at Big Ten Media Days out in Las Vegas and Sin City. And then camp will start at the 1st of August. It is coming full speed ahead. We're here at lettermenrow.com. Go to the Lettermen Row YouTube channel, like the video below, subscribe to the channel. Then go to lettermenrow.com, get your membership, $1 for your first 7 days. That's Mick Walker. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back here soon for another breakdown of the Buckeyes. This was just a big old breakdown of the quarterbacks. We'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.